In today's virtual horsemanship lesson, we're going to talk about wrapping. And my husband wanted me to rapidly rap about wrapping, but I didn't think I could come up with something that was very entertaining. Plus, I can only rap so rapidly about wrapping to start with. Anyway, let's start with why you might wrap. You've probably seen people that have wrapped their horse's legs for exercise, and that's a thing that is very, very common. You might also wrap your horse when he's stabled, or you might wrap him for shipping purposes. And sometimes your horse gets a boo-boo and you need to wrap the leg to protect the wound in some way, shape, or form. Basically, wraps offer protection. Some wraps offer some support. They can be used to trap heat in for some reason. And of course, they can be used to keep a dressing in place if your vet has been out and worked on your horse and their boo-boo. Let's start with the basics of what I have in my wrapping bucket. If you're going to do a standing wrap or a stable wrap, which is pretty much beyond a polo wrap, your most basic type of wrapping, you're going to need a form of padding. I like these that are quilted because they keep their evenness to the padding very well. Although I will say I have a horse that hates this nice soft cotton and will rip the wrap off. And he likes the old-fashioned kind that aren't nicely quilted a lot better. So it is a little bit to your horse's personal preference. But padding is important. Beyond padding then, you need your outer wrap of some sort. Most people these days really like these slightly knit, slightly stretchy wraps that have Velcro on the end. They're very easy to wrap with. It's easy to get good tightness. They're fantastic. They're my preference. The old-fashioned way is with what is called a flannel. These are not very stretchy. They're very durable. And you can make a nice, solid wrap with a flannel if you know what you're doing, but they take a lot of practice. And because they're a bit old-fashioned, you have to know how to secure them with pins and with tape over top of that. We're not going to go into that because at this point I'd consider that kind of a specialty wrapping skill, but do be aware there is such a thing as a flannel, and you can wrap with it. The most common type of wrap that you've probably seen is a polo wrap. It does not need padding because the padding is built into the wrap itself. It's what you see people generally exercising their horses in. The wrap has a little bit of padding and a tiny bit of stretch, and they're just used for protection on your horse's leg. Other things that I keep in my wrapping kit beyond that, I have a couple of types of rolled gauze. This is very clingy roll gauze. It's fantastic for wrapping a tail that you need to get out of your way, and it's very good at holding a dressing in place as well because it basically sticks to itself. Fantastic stuff. This is a smaller version of the same thing. It's cling gauze, and again, very good for keeping a dressing in place. Speaking of which, I keep little Teflon squares in my wrapping kit because you never know when you're going to use them. This is one that I would not use on a wound because it's clearly no longer sterile. It's an example purposes. Everybody knows vet wrap, or an elastic adhesive, self-adhesive bandage is the non-name brand version. This is actually not vet wrap, it's Power Flex. All different kinds of brands. The point is they stick to themselves very well. Biggest thing with these is that you don't get them too tight. But it's a very, very useful, disposable form of outer wrap. I also keep an ace bandage in my wrapping kit. You don't wrap legs with ace bandages. It's way too easy to get too tight. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you wrap a tail with an ace bandage. Again, you can get it too tight very easily. And if you do that on a tail, your horse could actually lose its tail. However, I've had a lot of practice wrapping tails, and an ace bandage is my favorite thing to stick on a tail for 20 minutes or so just to help shape it. So I keep one of those in my wrapping kit. This is what's called a spider bandage. I've got one of these hanging out. It's made out of flannel that has all these tags. It's for if you have to wrap a hawk. You could also do a knee with it. It's definitely a specialty bandage, but because you probably don't get to see one in real virtual life very often, this is what a spider bandage looks like. You can absolutely make your own wrap. Therefore, I keep a bunch of sheet cotton in my wrapping bucket. If you have a horse that has weird shaped legs, or if you need to stop bleeding, the sheet cotton is fantastic stuff. You can make your own wrap. This is a standing wrap that I made, and this is a shipping wrap that I made. You take the sheet cotton and you get it the right size for your horse's leg, and then you cover it in a gauze, and then you spray or sew, if you're crafty like that, the gauze, and you have a wrap that is custom fit to your horse's leg. Why is a shipping wrap this big and a standing wrap this big? Well, it has to do with what parts of the horse's legs that they cover, and we'll cover that a little bit later on. I also have some good old-fashioned saran wrap or cling wrap in my bandaging kit. You can use this for applying a sweat wrap. It's just what it sounds like. It makes the leg sweat, and probably only going to do this under the advice of your veterinarian. Also, some paper sacks, because you can use those when applying a poultice. You put the poulticing material on the leg, then you wet a paper bag, and you put, or newspaper, and you put that around the poultice, and then you put your standing wrap on top of that. So I have some of these in my bag. And then last but not least, I have a pair of bandaging scissors to show you, but they're not here. I have a pair of regular scissors for cutting up stuff like this. So that's what's in my bandaging kit. Those are my bandaging materials. We'll go into some of the different types of wraps here in just a moment. One of the tricks to successfully applying a wrap is to start with a wrap that's been properly rolled up. It makes all the difference in the world when you're putting it on the horse's leg. It's easiest to do if you have a buddy, but I'm all alone and by myself in the isolation. And so I've learned to do it all on my own. First, you want to make sure you get it rolled up the correct way. So if you're lucky enough to be using a wrap that has Velcro, find your Velcro and Velcro the Velcro to itself. If you start your wrap this way, it will always be wrapped up properly. So find your Velcro, Velcro the Velcro back onto itself. That starts your wrap rolling in the proper direction. Now, when you're rolling up your wrap, the important thing is to keep it nice and tight and even. So I use one hand to pull on the extra wrap and one hand to roll, and I just roll it along my knee. Keeping firm pressure the whole time, keeping it even, obviously keeping it facing the right way, and you just roll your wrap up. Until you have a nice tight bundle. This will go on a whole lot better than this one will. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it's pretty loose, whereas this one is pretty tight. This one is going to wrap onto the horse's leg so much easier than this one is going to. If you can't master the rolling it up on your knee and you also don't have a friend, this is the other way to do it. Find something that's good and secure. Tie the very end of your wrap to it. Stall fronts are awesome for this. And then you have to back way up here so you can actually see it. Again, Velcro the Velcro onto itself. And then you're going to use your stall wall or whatever you have it tied to keep the tension. Personally, I find this method takes a long time. It does give you a nice tight wrap, but it's easier to roll it up on your knee. Just practice doing it that way and you'll be good to go. However, this way does work. And when you're all said and done, you have a nice tight wrap that's ready to put on your horse's leg. There are lots of different preferences in how to wrap a polo wrap, but I'm going to show you the way that I like to and explain why I like to do it that way. Unlike typical wraps with a polo wrap, you start at the very top of the area that you're wrapping, which is from just below the knee to the fetlock. Again, I start just a hair bit forward of where I want my wrap to end up. And I actually start my wrap with about half of it up on the knee itself. I then wrap around just down under the knee so that I've got a tag sticking up high. That tag then gets folded down over the rest of the wrap, right in the groove between the cannon bone and the tendons, and that helps secure the wrap in place. Once I've got that, I take one more pass around that area, and then again, I start heading down the leg, coming across the cannon bone with a slight tug. You don't have really any extra padding, so you don't need to tug tightly, but a little tug across the front of the cannon bone toward the back of the horse, keeping everything nice and evenly spaced. Now, I like to cut my polo wraps. It protects the fetlock just a little bit better. Some people think it provides a little support. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I like to do it this way. So when I get to just above the fetlock, I then take one wrap down below the fetlock, right over the erget, and then kind of twist the wrap so that it comes back up and makes a perfect little V right at the front of the fetlock where that joint is. Then you wrap your way right back up, again keeping nice even pressure, nice even spacing, and if the wrapping gods smile on you, you end up with your wrap, put your leg down, ending right on the outside of the leg. As with any wrap, it's important that you have even pressure, even tightness, that you're tight enough that it's not going to slide down the leg, but not so tight that you can't get your finger in, and that everything is nice and even, and always, and it's wrapped in the correct direction. When wrapping a leg, direction is one of the very important things. You always want to come across the cannon bone toward you, and then toward the back of the horse, pushing the tendons in toward the middle of the horse, and then coming around to start the circle again, across the cannon bone toward you, toward the back of the horse on the outside of the leg. Padding comes first. You want to line it up so that the lump in your padding, where the padding starts, ends up right between the cannon bone and the tendons. It will rotate a little bit as you put it on, so I always start mine just a hair forward of where I want it. Pressure, even pressure, and tightness are the next two important things. And that starts with getting your padding on evenly, well secured, and with the right amount of tightness. Next comes the wrap part of your wrap. If you're being absolutely proper, you tuck it underneath your padding. That takes a little bit of practice to do. And then again, you're going the same direction. So across the cannon bone, toward the back of the horse, around the leg, and every time you come across the cannon bone, in order to get it tight enough, you give a little tug. Keep your pressure nice as you go backwards, across the cannon bone, little tug, back around the leg, across the cannon bone, little tug, back around the leg. You want to keep everything evenly spaced so your wrap is nice and has even pressure. Across the cannon bone, little tug toward the back of the leg. When you get down to the fetlock, you're going to head right back up again. Back, across the cannon bone, a little tug toward the back of the leg. I like to smooth out any wrinkles that show up as I go along, so you'll see me doing that. If you roll up your wrap right, you don't get very many to start with. Little tug. And if everything happens just right, you end up with your fasteners on the outside, front or outside of the leg. Doesn't always happen. The world's not perfect. But it's nice when it does. So there you go. Now you have a nice standing wrap on the leg. There's no cupping. It goes from just below the hock to right at the fetlock. The spacing is very even. The pressure is very even. It's good and tight. I can't push it down the leg, but it's not so tight that I can't get my fingers in there. It's a very adequate wrap. This is an example of a shipping wrap. I would never actually ship in this, but you get the general idea. This pad is actually a little bit too big for this horse because the padding sticks up above his knee. The important thing with the shipping wrap is that you're also protecting the bulbs of the heel instead of just most of the leg. So you'll notice that this wrap does come down below the bulbs of the heel. What I do when I ship is I put on a standing wrap and a pair of bell boots. It's much easier. And I promised I would show you a tail wrap. Again, this is something you probably need to be taught how to do in person at first, just because it's really important that you don't get it too tight. Like the polo wraps, there are a lot of different versions of tail wraps. I'm going to show you my preference, but you're welcome to do whatever type that you'd like. This one I use to shape this massive amount of hair before he goes to a show. It's helpful if they've relaxed their tail a little bit before you try to do this. It's a little bit cold today, and he's not really having that with my cold fingers. So you start with your wrap right at the dock, which is the top of the tail, and you take a wrap or two around up there to secure it. And then what I'm doing is called a herringbone, and you're just going to kind of go on little diagonals. So I go down a little bit, and I go up a little bit, and I go down a little bit, and I go up a little bit. And you just do that, ideally all the way to the base of their tail. And then I just stick my wrap in itself because I don't have it on super tight. So this is the herringbone tail wrap. The nice thing about the herringbone is because of the crossing, it gives it a little bit of grab without having to stick pieces of hair in there to hold it. So everything stays nice and tight. It's not tight on his tail, but it keeps his tail just ever so flattened down. And if you wet the tail hairs down before you put this on, it really helps shape the tail. When you're ready to take it off, you can unwrap it, or you can just pull it off that way. You want to do what's called a shipping wrap for tails. I'll show you how to do that, but again, an ace bandage is not preferable for that because it's too easy to get it too tight. And trailer rides are usually long enough that too tight is a really big problem. You don't want your horse to lose its tail. But I'll show you the idea, and again, get some hands-on practice and instruction before you actually do it. You start the same way you did the other tail wrap, just with a wrap or two right up around the dock. And then as you work your way down, you just pull little segments of hair up into it, and then the next wrap you take, you fold that back down again. And I like to change sides, so on this one, I'll pull a set of hair up here, and then you do a set of hair, roll down like that, and that there, fold that down. You get the idea. The point of the hair is to help hold this in place so it doesn't slide off during travel. You wouldn't want to do this right before you went in the show ring though, because now you've got all these kinky little spots of hair. And this one you cannot just pull off because it's anchored by these hair pieces. So this one you do actually have to go through and unwrap.